Today we're going to talk about the Pythagorean theorem, so please make sure you have your notebooks out. You're going to need a calculator, a pencil, that kind of stuff, so that you can take notes and write down the examples, and a calculator. You will need one today. So Pythagoras was a Greek mathematician and a philosopher who discovered one of the most famous rules in mathematics. In mathematics, a rule is called a theorem. So Pythagoras discovered a rule called the Pythagorean theorem, and that's what we are going to talk about today. So the first thing I want you to put into your notes is this. I want you to draw a picture of the triangle, of a right triangle, and I want you to label the sides. So the legs are the two sides that make up the right triangle, and the hypotenuse is the side that is the opposite of that right angle. And you have to know them. I also need you to know what is A, what is B, and what is C. The legs are both A and B. One can be A, one can be B. I don't care which one is which. The hypotenuse is always C. That one cannot change. So I want you to get this down. Pause the video and finish this up, and then we'll move on. So we're going to talk about the Pythagorean theorem first without actually knowing what it is. So if I were able to move these squares around, and I'm not right now with this, they don't move around. They will on my smartboard, but they don't here. I want you to use these three squares to create a right triangle. I want you to do this. You're just going to be moving the squares around. You can think about it, pause if you want. Otherwise, here we go. I would use this first square and I'd put it over here. So again, it's not going to be perfect, but here's my A. Here's my right angle. So my square of A and my square of B make up my right angle. And C, what I would do is I would move that. I'm going to use green for it just because something different. And I would move that to where it's right here. This would be C. And like I said, it's not going to be perfect, but there's where that would be. So this is huge. I need this in your notes. And make sure you write it in words and make sure you get the equation. Pause the video if you need to. You are going to have to know the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. If I asked you what slope-intercept form is, you would right away be able to say y equals mx plus b because we've gone over it a lot. We're going to do the same thing with the Pythagorean theorem. So be ready. What is the Pythagorean theorem? A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So this is A. We're going to label our sides. A and B are our legs. C is our hypotenuse, the one that's opposite. So we're going to do the Pythagorean theorem, and I want all of this written in your notes. Every time we do a problem with the Pythagorean theorem, you're going to start out with the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Now, let's fill in our numbers. We have 5 squared plus 12 squared equals C squared, and we're going to solve for C. 5 squared is 25. 12 squared is 144. Equals C squared. I'm going to add those two together. I get 169 equals C squared. Now, I want to solve just for C. In order to get C by itself, I'm going to do the square root of C. C squared is actually C times C. So the square root of C is C. Square root of 169, we should know this by now, is 13. And of course, we're going to label it meters. And there's our answer. I want to see all of this in your notes. And every problem you do today, you're going to do this whole thing. I want to see every single step. So let's do it again. I've got A, I've got B, I need to find C. So first line, Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. I'm going to plug in my numbers. I have 6 and 10, so 6 squared plus 10 squared equals C squared. 6 squared is 36. 10 squared is 100. You can see why knowing your perfect squares is going to help. Add them together, you get 136 equals C squared. We're going to find the square root of both sides, and here's where it says make sure you round your answer to the nearest tenth. So let's go through this. If I plug this into my calculator, I get 11.66190379. Okay, so let's go over rounding. Round to the nearest tenth. Here's my tenth spot. What does this 6 do to that 6? 0 through 4, it stays the same. 5 and up, you go up 1. So now instead of 6, this would be a 7. So my answer is 11 7/10 meters. And there's my answer. I want to see all of this. Now, if we look at this one, I have A and I have B and I know C. So again, we start out with the Pythagorean theorem. We fill in what we know. We have 7 squared. We don't know B. We do know C. So 7 squared is 49. 25 squared is 625. Now, we solve it just like we would a normal equation. We're going to subtract 49 from both sides. So B squared equals 576. We find the square root. B equals 24 feet. We don't have to round it because it comes out to a whole number. Try this one on your own. Pause the video and try it on your own and see how you do. We have A, we have B, we have C. So we're going to start out with the Pythagorean theorem. I have A squared plus 10 squared equals 14 squared. A squared plus 100 equals 196. I'm going to subtract 100 from both sides. So A squared equals 96. I find the square root of 96. Round to the nearest hundredth. Sorry, square root. 9.79, so 9.8 centimeters. And again, 9.797958 keeps on going. I'm rounding to nearest tenth. That 9 makes it an 8. Here's a word problem, and we don't do these anything different. If you look at it, you ride your bicycle along the outer edge of a park. You take a shortcut back. Here's the outer edge of our park, and here's our shortcut. We have A, we have B, we have C. So A squared plus B squared equals C squared. You need to start every problem with this today. We have 100 squared plus 60 squared equals C squared. So 100 squared, make sure you use a calculator if you have to, is 10,000. 60 squared is 3,600. That equals C squared. Add them together, we get 13,600. We do the square root. And again, we're going to label, so round, 116, and I get 0.619. This one doesn't change it. 6/10 meters. And there's our answer. So again, try these on your own. Pause the video and go ahead and try them on your own, and then come back and see how you did. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. 15 squared plus 8 squared equals C squared. 15 squared is 225 plus 64 equals c squared. 289 equals c squared. Find the square root of each of those. C equals 17 feet. I'll do this one in green. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. I've got A, I've got B, and I know C. So A is 16 squared plus B squared equals 20 squared. 16 squared is 256. 20 squared is 400. I'm going to subtract 256 from both sides. So B squared equals 144. I happen to know that one. That's a perfect square. B equals 12. And I don't have to label it because there's no labels up here. So again, we've got A, we've got B, we've got C. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So we have 16 squared plus B squared equals 34 squared. 16 squared is 256, just like it was over here, plus B squared. 34 squared is 156. We subtract 256 from both sides. So B squared equals 900. I have a feeling I know what this one is, but I'm going to double check on my calculator anyway. Whoops. B equals 30, and again, they have it labeled, so we're going to label it 30 yards. Now we're going to talk about the second part of this lesson, and that's the converse of the Pythagorean theorem. You technically already know what it is, but we're going to practice. So the first thing I want you to do is put the definition into your notes. So you're going to put this into your notes. The converse of the Pythagorean theorem is, if the equation a squared plus b squared equals c squared is true for the side lengths of a triangle, then the triangle is a right triangle. So basically what they're saying is if you plug the three numbers into the Pythagorean theorem and it works, it's a right triangle. Pause the video and write it. We're going to practice it on the next slide. So let's start with the green one. Now, both of these look like they could be right triangles, but I want mathematical proof that they are or are not. So we're going to start with the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. I'm going to plug my sides in. Here's A, B, and C. And again, I don't care which one's A and which one's B. So I have 9 squared plus 40 squared equals 41 squared. 9 squared is 81. 40 squared is 1600. 41 squared is 1681. I add these two together, 1681 equals 1681. Yes, this is a right triangle because it equals each other. Let's do letter B. Again, starting out with the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. I've got A, I've got B, I've got C. So A is 18 plus 12 squared equals 24 squared. 18 squared is 324. 12 squared is 144. 24 squared is 576. Oops, I forgot the 7. Let's get that in there. 576. I'm going to add these two together. 324 plus 144 is 468. That does not equal 576. So this would not be a right triangle. Now, sometimes they don't give you the picture. They just give you the numbers. Well, if you think back to our definition of the Pythagorean theorem, C is always the longest side. I don't care which one's A or which one's B, but C is always the longest side. So we're going to start with a squared plus b squared equals c squared, always today. And I generally, if I don't have the triangle to where I can look, I generally put them in numerical order. So this is 6 squared, this is 7 squared, and obviously this one is 12 squared. The hypotenuse is always the longest side. So 6 squared is 36, 7 squared is 49, 12 squared is 144. I did all of that without a calculator because I know my perfect squares. 36 plus 49 equals 85. That does not equal 144. This is not a right triangle. So to pause the video and go ahead and try a couple on your own and see if you got them. Then come back and we'll see how we did. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. And again, I'm just going to put them in numerical order. So I got 27 squared plus 36 squared equals 45 squared. 27 squared is 729. 36 squared is 1296. I'm going to add them together right away while I've got it on my calculator. That's going to equal 225. Well, then I have to go back here. 45 squared is 225. So 2025, sorry, does equal 225. Yes, this is a right triangle. Let's do number 4. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Put them in numerical order. 20 squared plus 21 squared equals 28 squared. 20 squared is 400. 21 squared is 441. I add those together, I get 841. 28 squared is 784. That does not equal, so this is not a right triangle. Your homework is at the end of the lesson, 6.2. You're going to do 3 through 16, and that's on the Pythagorean theorem. And then 6.2b, which is on the converse, is numbers 13 through 23. All the problems are at the end of the lesson. I want all your work shown on paper. And you are going to start every single problem with the Pythagorean theorem. What is the Pythagorean theorem? A squared plus b squared equals c squared. You start every problem with that. If you have questions, please come and talk to me. Otherwise, good luck.